Hi, Judy, the YouTube lawyer, is here today again with a different live stream show. Today's live stream show is going to cover some real estate horror stories, both from my personal experience and regarding some things that have been in the news, which I'm sure many of the people out there have already heard about. So I was already planning on doing this live stream focusing on this crazy story of a house that got totally ruined by a tenant in Colorado Springs. But then just on Thursday morning, 1:30 in the morning, that was when the condo in Miami, Florida collapsed. And that's been all in the news for the last day and a half. So I would also like to touch on that too. So, a lot of times when you read some personal finance books, or if you watch some finance, legal, or finance YouTubers, they tell you that you should also invest in real estate. And I remember a couple of decades ago, in particular, when Robert Kiyosaki had his popular famous book out called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He was constantly saying that, well, the rich dad taught me that I need to buy real estate, invest in real estate. And I just was not impressed by his book, even though the general idea that, yeah, you need to be smart about your money and have a different kind of mindset if you really want to be rich. But he had no details, no real details or concrete actions or advice to give as to how exactly are you supposed to get rich, or how are you supposed to get into real estate to get rich. It wasn't really a how-to book. It was just like generalized, like ideology type of stuff. So, and then for many people, they still feel like, oh, I gotta buy more investments, or I need to put my money in real estate. It's always important to have at least a certain portion of your assets in real estate, yada, yada. But based on my experience and everything I've heard and seen and dealt with my family, I am just going to come out right now and say that no, I do not agree that everybody should be diving into real estate. There's been this total deluge of HGTV type shows over the last 10 years, talking about flipping houses and making it seem so easy to just like buy some dilapidated piece of crap and then, hire some contractors and put on some paint and new flooring, and voila, your investment has gone up multifold and you're going to be like bombarded with all these like offers from buyers, and then you're going to get rich quick. So there is no such thing as get rich quick. And hey, Christy, thank you so much for being here. Oh, good. Yeah, so you agree with me. Yeah, I didn't think that book was that good. And I was really glad that I didn't pay for the book, because I think I was cheap and just sat in a bookstore reading it here and there. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's a nice idea, but you're not telling us really how to do anything. So I will teach you to be rich. Shows actionable items you can take to be in a better financial position. Okay, yeah, I've never heard of that book, but I'll definitely look into it. So thanks for the recommendation. Yeah. So let's talk about first the news that's been most prevalent in the news here, which is the poor, just like the sad tragedy that just occurred in Miami with the condo, the 12-story condo that collapsed, or at least half of it collapsed. And who knows how many people have actually died in that, because there's still at least 100 or maybe well over 100 people who are unaccounted for. They know for sure that at least 4 people have died. Luckily, it sounds like they were able to rescue a teenage boy. And then they also rescued the boy's mother, although they had to amputate her leg to get her out from the rubble. So just a terrible story here. Let's see. So the CNN headline was that this pancake, they call it a pancake because it really does look like in some of the pictures that layer upon layer of the building was just piled up on top of each other. It would be really, really a miracle if more people actually survive, or they find more people who are still alive under there. So it says pancake collapses, what they are and why they're dangerous. Yeah. But from a financial or real estate investment perspective, yeah, this is a cautionary tale that when you invest in real estate, particularly in condos or townhomes, where you're not the sole owner of the whole building, then those types of investments tend to be a lot riskier and are a lot harder to resell. And this building was built in 1981. It was on the ocean. And from some of the construction experts I've read so far, they're saying that it could be because of the seawater or the salt air really permeates into the concrete, so that someone said it was like concrete cancer, where the elements just kind of wear away at the concrete and the steel rebars, causing rust and deterioration, so that over time, in addition to the land underneath sinking, gradually over the decades, that could have caused the collapse of this poor building here. So anyway, right now they don't know exactly what happened or why it happened, but it sounds like there was some cause for alarm. At least that professor from Florida International University had done some research about it just about a year or so ago. In terms of legal liability, though, I'm not a construction law expert. I don't do construction law, and I'm an attorney in North Carolina, so definitely I'm sure things are different in Florida there. But this building was built in 1981, and it sounds like the original builder is deceased now. I'm not sure if that company that built the condo even exists anymore. So I'm not really sure what kind of legal claims the owners or the owners' estates could potentially have against anyone, possibly against any engineers or something. Although they're saying that in Florida, you have to recertify the safety of the buildings every 40 years. That doesn't sound frequent enough to me. That doesn't sound like I would have a lot of faith in how strong my condo building is or my home is, especially if it's like right near the water. So anyway, the reinspection or recertification seemed to be going okay so far, but then lo and behold, this thing happens, and it's just so awful that it would happen here. You think in the United States, like, oh, we have the best of everything. We have, we have standards, we have construction standards, we have engineers, we have highly educated people, building these things, but who knows what went wrong here. And at the very least, you would think that the homeowners or the condo owners probably had insurance, but I don't know if the insurance policies could have had certain clauses excluding damage that might have happened due to construction errors. So as a cautionary tale, I have many cautionary tales here. There was a situation about 8 years ago when I was thinking about buying a townhome here in North Carolina. And so I was looking at this really nice end unit place that is in the Triangle area, and the price was right. It was really cheap, actually. I mean, people who are tuning in from bigger cities or somewhere like California or New York City, you would probably be shocked, but there was this 3-story, roughly 1,600 square foot, 3-bedroom townhome that I was looking at. And the sales price was something like $215,000. And it was an end unit. It was in the right neighborhood. It was close to where I worked. So I was really excited about it. And I put $500 earnest money down. But then ultimately during the home inspection, my home inspector noticed that there were cracks in some of the bricks that were maybe in the front or the side or both parts of the townhome, and looked more into it. And ultimately, it seemed like the townhome was not properly built in the first place. I'm no expert in construction, so I can't even remember what the exact words were, but something was not level completely, most likely with the way that the townhome was built. So from what I've heard, at least in this area, due to the nature of the soil and everything, that the soil needs to be like compacted down over and over again, or needs to be like fortified, something to do with the foundation being done right to hold the weight of the townhome. And so perhaps this townhome, which by then was maybe about 10 years old, maybe it was actually kind of slightly sinking already or something. So something was causing those bricks to start showing cracks. So as soon as I heard that, and, talked to some friends who knew other people in the construction industry, they told me, run away fast, do not buy that townhome, even though it looks good right now, that's just something where it's never going to be as good as it should have been had it been built properly. So I'm glad that I dodged that bullet. Of course, the seller's realtor was this patronizing Southern boy, who even called me honey and wanted me to go through with the deal, and was like, oh, come on, the sellers really like you, and there's really nothing wrong with the house or whatever, it's totally safe, it passed inspection for us, whatever. So, but I was like, forget it. If I'm going to be sinking in a big chunk of money into this townhome, it's still going to cost $215,000 anyway. There were some other options that I had. So I decided not to go through with that townhome purchase. And I'm really glad, because just over time, especially if you buy, like I said, a condo or a townhome, it's not going to appreciate as much as a single family home. And I definitely found that out in the past when I tried to sell another townhome that my ex-husband and I owned in the Morrisville location. So, yeah, I mean, those townhomes definitely are aging, and who knows what kind of issues those owners are now facing. Because the funny thing is that I had this friend, an old friend, who decided that he was going to invest in townhomes in that same exact complex that I was about to buy something in. And he said he had done his research about how the population was growing, and there are all these well-heeled white-collar professionals moving into the RTP area. So he just went ahead and bought at least one or maybe two of those townhomes, those 3-story townhomes, without even coming down to North Carolina to see them. But I have heard from other people that those units are getting cracks in the corners of where the ceiling meets the walls. There could be other issues. So it's just such a crapshoot, I think, in my opinion, to invest in real estate. You just never know what kind of problems are going to come up. And the next topic, of course, is you could totally wind up with a nightmare tenant. So let's move on to talk about nightmare tenant situations. And since I am a lawyer, I have been involved with too many cases to count, or I've talked to so many people where they're either the landlord and they're totally mad because of something the tenant did, usually not paying the rent or damaging the property. Or sometimes I hear from tenants who are upset because they're feeling oppressed by their landlord not fixing things, or there's mold growing on the walls, or leaks, or roaches and pests and everything. So there are many legal problems that can arise from real estate, not just construction, but definitely between the landlords and the tenants. Yeah. Oh, yes, that's super cheap to us here in Cali. Yeah, that's right. What could you get for $215,000 in California? I don't know. Could you even get like a studio somewhere, like in some far-flung town in California that's not near San Francisco or Los Angeles? I don't know. Yeah, because I've seen some like a distant relative has a home in Palo Alto, and out of sheer nosiness, I looked up the home, and it's worth like who knows what, like $2.5 million, but it's like a really small old house that was built in the 1920s that probably has 2 bedrooms. Yeah. So, okay. So you can't even get anything. Well, granted, this was 8 years ago when I was trying to buy that 3-story townhome for $215,000 here in North Carolina. So now those townhomes are probably, I would say, going for, say, like $275, maybe. I mean, I didn't bother to check it off recently. Yeah, but those townhomes, everything just continues to age and deteriorate over the years, much like physically our bodies as we get older, everything starts falling down. So, yeah, so very risky to invest in condos or townhomes, in my opinion, especially if you're just looking to rent them out to tenants who may just turn out to be kind of like like unprofessional people that don't have good morals, and they don't care, about leaving your place a trashed mess when they leave. Yeah. Might be able to get something for 400K if you're lucky, but you're definitely not in the city. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because I have relatives that live around Oakland as well as in San Francisco. And yeah, it's amazing how even really old properties, in San Francisco could be worth millions upon millions of dollars just because of the location. Yeah. So of course, the exception in my mind is that if you really want to invest in real estate, then it's probably only worth it if you buy property that's located in a really hot metropolitan city, like in New York City or San Francisco, or right in Washington, D.C. Places around Northern Virginia that are right near DC are always hot too. The value just keeps going up. But in a lot of other cities or other places, boy, it's, I keep using the word crapshoot, but it is such a crapshoot not knowing whether this investment is going to turn out or not. So one example I want to give you is my old childhood neighborhood, which is Stone Mountain, Georgia. So I used to live, or I mostly grew up in this neighborhood that used to be like one of the nicest neighborhoods in Stone Mountain, Georgia. It was called Hidden Hills. And back then, I think the houses were mostly built in the early 1980s. So we moved in, and I'm not sure if I don't think we were the first people to live in our house. But it's just very sad whenever I have gone back over the years to go to Stone Mountain and try to visit my old house, my old family house again, because the neighborhood has really gone to pieces there. And so there were actually a lot of foreclosures there in the last 5 or so years, because out of nosiness again, every so often I would just kind of Google and see, hey, how's my childhood home doing? And how's the neighborhood doing? And what are the houses going for there? But I do see that, at least it looks like there are some houses that have been well taken care of in Stone Mountain, Georgia, but there definitely have been plenty of foreclosures. Like I saw a really sad listing for a house that looked familiar in Hidden Hills a while back, and it was going like, it was like pre-foreclosure or a short sale or something, and they only listed it for $70,000 because even the pictures made it look really scary and gross. You could see like pipes like evident in the ceilings from the basement, or everything looked really junky and nothing had been updated since 1984. It looked like the tenants or the owners just gave up and could care less about making the house look good. Yeah. So when my family bought our house, it was a very nice house. It wasn't like totally lavish or anything, but it was an almost new house back in the early 80s. And back then the houses were going for, say, like about 110, 120K. But even now it's like 40 years later, and the houses in that neighborhood, Hidden Hills, are going for like 260K, 320K, 200K, 169. 194. Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, this last house that looks a lot better and more updated, that's definitely not in Hidden Hills. It's probably like some other neighborhood that sprouted up nearby. Yeah. So it's just really sad, looking at these houses and thinking, oh, that house looked familiar. That house looked like a house I might have gone to for trick or treating, or that's the house that's, across the street from the bus stop where I used to go when I was a kid in the 80s, but the prices have just maybe gone up by like 2.5 times in the last 40 years. So there's definitely more crime there. In fact, I was kind of wondering, should I go to my high school reunion or not? There was actually a shooting at a gas station down the road. I looked up the news recently, another shooting in the neighborhood, just multiple shootings around my high school, which was walking distance from my neighborhood. So, yeah, luckily my family, we sold the house when I went off to college, and then they bought a house in Dunwoody, Georgia, which is further north. And I'll just go ahead and, since I always try to be honest with my viewers and stuff. And I feel like very few of my actual friends and relatives in real life, um, you know, watch my YouTube channel anyway. So this is another real estate horror story here. So back in 1987, um, this was another mistake, I think. Well, I mean, good and bad. But back in 1987, my mother's brother came to live with us in Georgia. And that was back when we were still living in Stone Mountain. Oh, hey, Dr. Sav, thank you for being here. She has a great financial channel, so this must be of further interest to you. And then she's also in the Atlanta area, too. So I'm talking about this neighborhood in Dunwoody. So first, my relatives came to live with us back in 1987 when we lived in Stone Mountain. And then when my parents ended up buying this other house in Dunwoody that you see on the screen, then my relatives, my uncle by then had two sons, my cousins, and we were all very close. Like everybody got along. We did everything together. We would go on family vacations together. My aunt partially helped to raise my younger brother and sister. So we were a very close family and everything seemed fine until my mother got cancer. And then my mother passed away back in 2002 from breast cancer in Taiwan. So at that time, the relatives were still living in my family's house. So you can guess what happened after my mother passed away. And then, these relatives are still living there. My mother had told me that my uncle was paying $300 a month rent to live there because for a while there, my younger siblings were also living with them too while my parents were still in Taiwan. So in effect, the relatives did help take care of my younger siblings for a time. But then later on, nobody was there except my aunt, uncle, and my two cousins. So my mom said that he had been paying $300 a month rent, but I never saw any proof of that. I'm not sure if that's true or not. He definitely did borrow money from her, and we had nothing in writing. So you can, again, guess what happened with that money. So we still had a mortgage on this home. And so this home just brings back all sorts of like bad memories for me now. I mean, we used to have so many like good times, during Christmas holidays or during summer breaks. I would be back here at this house in Dunwoody, even though I was already off at Berkeley at the time and then later living in DC to go to law school. So things really fell apart amongst our family because after my mom died, of course, my father was thinking, well, this is crazy. They're still living in the house, but they really should help pay more of the mortgage because the mortgage at the time, I mean, it's still pretty low. I mean, again, people like Christy out in California, you'll probably be laughing that, they couldn't afford it, but the mortgage was only a little over $1,200 a month on this house. So my father decided, well, let's ask him to pay $1,000 a month rent, to live in this house. And this was a, very nice, as you can see, brick front house with a 2-car garage in a nice, safe neighborhood up in Dunwoody, 4 bedrooms, 2 levels, had a nice deck in the back, nice backyard and everything. But even then, my uncle still, this is all stuff that I found out after my mother passed away and I had to handle pretty much all the family finances and the properties and everything. Apparently he was not very much on the up and up in terms of finances and borrowing money from other relatives and just screwing over people in general. And always seeming like a very, very nice guy. He does seem like a very nice guy. And I think that's how he was able to sweet talk so many people into giving him money and then never paying them back. So it totally became a big, big mess. After who knows how long this happened, probably like at least a year or two of constantly, asking my uncle for the rent, have you paid it? Are you going to pay the rent? He was supposed to put the money into my father's bank account in Georgia. I think this was before that bank really had like a good website or anything. So I remember constantly calling the bank, every month to check and see, was there a deposit made? Was there a deposit made? There was excuses after excuses after excuses. Sometimes he would make a couple of payments here and then skip another couple of months and then, make a payment here and then say, oh, I'm really sorry, but something happened. One of my employers like ran into some utility pole, blah, 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 so I had to pay for that. And, I promise I'll be able to pay $3,000 in a couple of months. A couple of months would roll by. I'd call up the bank and then there was no check being put in. So it was just an absolute nightmare. And just to speed up the story, even trying to get my relatives to move out of the house was just excruciating and very frustrating. And, it still makes me sad to think about it. But then ultimately, I feel like, these people did not act in very moral ways. The house was in disrepair. I remember there was a toilet that didn't even work when I went over to visit. There was like junk in every nook and cranny of the whole house and the garage. One time I drove down to Georgia to try to clean up stuff in the house and had already told my aunt and uncle, as well as my older cousin, who at that time was in college then, that I'm really sorry, but my dad says that you guys need to find another place to live. I didn't try to say the word eviction or anything, but tried to make it clear that, look, you guys just can't keep living here anymore, especially if you can't even afford to pay $1,000 a month. That doesn't even cover the actual mortgage, and not to mention the money that my uncle still owes. But of course, we're never going to see a dime of that. So it was really, really tough. Finally, they did move out, but the house was left in complete disaster. There was like rotting food in the refrigerator. There was junk just piled high in the garage, still more junk in all the closets and everything. And my brother was still living there, but of course, he was young at the time. And so I wound up having to handle everything, finding the realtors, trying to fix up some stuff here and there. We would hire people to try to renovate or replace or repair some stuff, and sometimes they did a shoddy job. So, for example, we tried to get granite countertops done in the kitchen. Then I came back down to Georgia and saw that, who the heck did this job? The countertop like stuck out. It jutted out like an extra 6 to 12 inches away from the counter than it really should have. It was just like a very poorly done job that we then had to spend more money trying to fix up. The worst was that with real estate, as things get older, things break down. And a lot of times you find out later that, this building material that people used back in the 80s or back in the 70s or whatever, back in the 90s, that turned out to have a class action case against a company, or this building product is no longer being used anymore because it's unsafe or no good or whatever. So in this situation, it turned out that the house had polybutylene pipes. So that kind of pipe, I guess the maker also had some sort of class action lawsuit filed against them because those pipes failed and, busted up very easily. So, so we had to pay thousands of dollars to get totally new pipes done throughout the whole house. Another problem was that one time the realtor told me that there were bricks falling off the side of the house. So we had to get that repaired. And then it turned out that there were some like teenagers or vandals just like hanging out in the backyard of my family's house while it was vacant and leaving a mess, beer bottles and trash all over the place. I also had to worry about lawn maintenance while the house was on the market for all those years. And even the neighbors would complain to the realtor and say that, hey, there are all these weeds like overgrowing it. So it's just incredibly hard to be a landlord when you don't live anywhere near your property, because who is going to handle it? The realtor is only going to do so much for you. And, we did go through several realtors before the house finally, thank God, sold after 4 years of being on the market. And it definitely went for a lot less than what my father originally had wanted to list the house at. And it was like one of the happiest days of my life was when the realtor told me that we had finally gotten an offer and we could finally be through with this. And meanwhile, during the whole 4 years, we had to continue to make all these repairs to the house and to pay for lawn maintenance, just deal with potential vandalism to the house while it sat there empty. And I'm sure the neighbors were all kind of getting a bit irked or angry at us because, that wasn't helping their property values or helping their property to look good either, when there was this vacant, house that was drawing in some like teenagers that wanted to hang out and drink beer in the back. So, yeah. So Dr. Steph says, I lived in, oh, okay. So you're familiar with this. Yeah. It was off of Peeler Road, not too far from Perimeter Mall and Chambly Dunwoody Road. So I remember hanging out at Perimeter Mall a lot. Yeah. I feel like, I guess what happened after your mom's had. Yeah, exactly. So it turned out that my mom had always been, she really loved her brother and was very good friends with my aunt. They lived with us, we helped each other out and everything. But after a while, especially when it comes to real estate or money or something, it's still always better, don't mix family or friends with money, much less real estate, because that's another hard thing about being a landlord. If you actually know your tenants or your relatives or your tenants, boy, it just really ruins your relationship if they try to take advantage of you, or they say they can't pay the rent, or something happened with them financially so that they can't pay you the rent, or, it's just very frustrating and puts you in a very awkward position to have to, tell people, look, you need to move out by this date. Here's your notice. You have to give them the notice in writing. And, ultimately I thought I would have to go through the eviction process, but finally they did pack up some of their stuff and moved out. But what's even worse was that my brother continued living in the house. And one night, my relatives just came back into the house in the middle of the night and took the refrigerator. So my brother had no refrigerator left, and he said he was actually scared because he had no idea like who had come into the house. And who knows, I'm sure my relatives would say that they bought the refrigerator themselves with their own money, but I'm not really sure about that, So let that be a lesson also, that if you do end up having to have tenants that move out or have to evict somebody, be sure to change the locks as soon as possible, because you don't know what's going on. Yeah. Oh, who are you trying to evict? Yeah, well, I didn't have to evict them ultimately. But it was getting to the point where I might have had to evict my own aunt and uncle and my two cousins that were still living in my family's house, because for at least a year or two, probably more like 2 years plus, after my mother passed away, my relatives just would not pay rent on time, or kept skipping months and racking up all this rent. The rent was already a big discount as it was. There was always some sob story. My dad actually talked to another relative and said, what should I do? He keeps saying that, he doesn't have the money. Apparently my uncle had told his relatives that he was going to buy my family's house. So they all loaned him a big chunk of money because he claimed that he was going to buy our house, but he never did. So of course the siblings were all wondering, well, what happened to the money? I guess we'll never see that again either. So, yeah, exactly. A refrigerator. Yeah. How much would it cost to go out and buy your own refrigerator? You can get a decent one for less than $1,000. But again, they didn't have $1,000 to pay the monthly rent. So I guess they had to break into the house in the middle of the night, well, months after they had already moved out, to come back and take the fridge out of the house. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm not sure if any of my relatives are going to actually watch this, but I'm telling the truth here. And it does, hurt my feelings too, when certain relatives just feel like I'm being the bad person out there, because I'm all about telling the truth here. And, it's just too bad that after my mom passed away, that a lot of these like financial issues came to the forefront. And, we saw the mishandling of finances or mishandling of funds by a relative that we really trusted and we thought was a good guy when we were growing up. I guess, I probably shouldn't say too much more about that. Yeah, there's always one in every. Yeah. Maybe you should do a video or a live stream about other financial issues that families can end up having. Yeah, you want to be one big happy family where people help each other out and Yeah, I mean, I know, especially in a lot of immigrant families, do pool their resources and live together. You know, like there could be like three generations living under one roof, or everybody stuffed into an apartment sharing the rent. You know, but after a while, you know, if you feel like you're being taken advantage of, you know, you start realizing, okay, it is better. You know, you guys need to get your own home. You know, you don't need to keep like freeloading off of some relative for how many years was that? It was like 20 years. Yeah, it was probably yeah, almost 20 years that my uncle was living with my family. Yeah, so I'm not in touch with him or his wife or my cousins anymore. So that's kind of sad. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, make sure you get your retainer in cash. Yeah. Money really changes people for sure. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, okay, well, you don't want to give us any rent. Then do you not realize that that means that, you know, it's my dad's money that has to just keep funneling you to have a free place to live? You know, is that right when you're a grown man? You know, you guys are like, you know, people in your 50s now, you know, and still mooching off of your deceased sister and brother-in-law. Totally. Yeah. So let me share. Let's stop talking about my personal problems here. Yeah. Before I get some angry phone call from a relative who actually watches my YouTube channel. Yeah. But yeah, let's look at this House of Horrors. Has anybody heard about this case, the Colorado Springs house, where there was this woman? You feel very sorry for her. Um, she had lived in her dream home in Colorado Springs. It was like, I'm not even sure, maybe almost 4,000 square foot house that looks really nice on the outside. And had at least like 5 bedroom house. It had a beautiful finished basement, it had a beautiful view. But the poor owner was this woman who came down with cancer. So she also needed to take care of her elderly mother who lived in another state. So she moved out of her house, and instead of selling it, whoops, you know, she decided to try to rent out her house. So the house rental thing went pretty well for quite a while. I think it was about like 10 years that this woman found a really nice tenant, another woman, to rent it to, and everything was fine. But then lo and behold, the tenant died, and the tenant's daughter, who is probably bat shit crazy, moved in without the landlord's knowledge. And so this woman did not pay the rent. Same old tune, you know, never paid the rent. And this is kind of strange, but apparently the woman, the crazy tenant, had a $38,000 roof installed on the house and then never paid the roofer. So the roofer put a lien on the house. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, especially out in Colorado, but it does seem kind of strange that the roofer never confirmed whether the person requesting the work was the actual owner of the house. So, it also sounds kind of weird because the owner bought the house decades ago for just a little over $200,000. But at the time that she was just trying to sell it a couple of weeks ago, the news article said that she still owed about $600,000 on the house. So I guess she must have like refinanced the house multiple times. And then, of course, there was that lien that was put against the house by the roofer that never got paid. Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. Seb, you've heard about that. Yeah. It was ridiculous. And then some people on the internet were even wondering, is this a true story? This, like, some of the story just sounds a little too crazy to be believed. So, as you can see here, they were calling it a house of horrors, and it got lots of publicity through tons of news outlets, including CNN. And this is from marketwatch.com. And you can see it says, available homes are so scarce that this nightmare listing seems like a steal, even though it's covered in graffiti and smells awful. So this must be mentally ill tenant spray painted all sorts of obscenities on every single wall, on the floor, on the carpet, on the kitchen countertops with black spray paint, you know, saying, haha, you know, how are you going to sell this now, Susie? And Susie Myers was the owner of the house. And what's even worse is that she left 2 cats to die upstairs in a bathroom. So I think it was a realtor that opened the door and saw the dead cats in the bathroom. So that's just really horrible, what she did. And there was also human feces that was on the floor, maybe upstairs in the hallway, who knows what, so animal and human feces and who knows what else, kind of like weird fluids. And what's funny is that the realtor wrote this bizarre but very captivating listing, just basically saying, hey, this house is going to need a ton of work, and do not go to the back porch, get ready for the smells in the basement, because the crazy tenant also left a freezer full of meat to rot in the basement. So she said when she first opened the door to the house, the realtor, she couldn't believe the stench from inside the home. Yeah. The realtor, Miss Foster, said that the house was a little slice of hell. So look at that house. I mean, it looks very nice on the outside. Yeah. So just really sad. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Animal abuse. Totally. Totally. Yeah. But the, news article said that the police were not able to find either the tenant or the so-called property manager, because the landlord had a property manager handling things. The names of these people are not given in any of the news stories. So it just seems really weird that the property manager still let the crazy tenant back into the house after the person had been formally evicted from the home for non-payment of rent. Like, why would you do that? I mean, that's the same thing as when you're firing an employee. Most employers will just go ahead and tell the person over the phone while the person is at home, don't come into work, you've been terminated. Or, they will escort the person out so that the person might not, doesn't have the opportunity to trash the office or to assault any coworkers or throw a fit or anything when they're on their way out. So it just doesn't make any sense that the tenant still had access to the house, unless the property manager was so idiotic that they felt sorry for the tenant and said, oh yeah, you can come back and get your things, and nobody was there. And that's where the crazy tenant had the opportunity to, totally trash the house, like damage all the surfaces. I'm sorry, I hit the microphone. Put black spray paint and obscenities all over the place. Yeah. I'm in a real estate group, and those folks said they would buy the house and repaint it. Oh, but yeah, it's definitely not just repainting, but all the feces and animal pee she placed all over the house was awful. That's right. That's right. And it's not that also. I think the back porch or the back deck was like destroyed too. So, yeah, I mean, how do you get rid of the stench? I think even the realtor was very blunt in the listing and told people about the stench. So, I mean, that's just disgusting. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Thank you for being here, Christy. Yeah. Have a good rest of your stream. Thanks. Some of those property managers are only about collecting their fees, sadly. Yeah, exactly. I have heard some bad reviews of one of the property management companies that advertises a lot in my area. I heard that they take a 7% fee from the rent that they collect, and then they don't really do anything. Yeah, I mean, another sort of personal horror story is that one of my relatives did buy a condo to live in. And again, bad idea. Don't invest in a condo, because this condo, ultimately was a total pain to get rid of. Once the person moved away from the area, she tried to rent it out to tenants and did find a tenant. Also paid a property management company, but this tenant just kept calling the property management company for every little thing that might have been wrong with the condo. Like if something was an issue with the sink, or some issue with the toilet or whatever, and every time the property management company had to send somebody out to look at things or to fix things, it cost my relative $100 for each call. And this was more than 5 years ago. So, not only was the rent not enough to cover the mortgage, plus the HOA or the condo dues, which were probably over $200 a month, but then you get this like total pain in the butt type of tenant that kept calling and, just like charging up the wazoo with all these maintenance costs. So finally, it took forever, because another problem with those kind of condos is that there were so many identical looking units that there were so many people that were selling identical units at the same time. So you can't really get top dollar for those types of condos. And I think that the high cost of the condo association fees scared away some people too. So ultimately, there was a very, very slight net gain on the sale of the condo, but that didn't make up for the fact that for probably a year or two, this person had been losing hundreds of dollars a month, just having to pay the exorbitant mortgage plus the condo fees, and the rent wasn't covering 100% of that. Yeah. My mom is a real estate agent. She has clients call all the time. Yeah. I mean, it is annoying, especially, when you're a real estate agent, you're working on commissions too. So when people are just bothering you and just wanting your advice, but they don't actually want to hire you, boy, I feel sorry for some real estate agents, because they do end up spending a lot of time just trying to get the listing or trying to get things to sell. And it's not always going to be a hot real estate market. Right now where I am in North Carolina, things have really heated up, and people are getting into bidding wars over the houses, and the housing prices have really skyrocketed just in the last half year, which is, really good in general, but it's just so speculative to invest in real estate, in my opinion. And it's just can be a total nightmare to be a landlord. Yeah. So just looking back at this house though, I heard that it was also built on a landslide zone. Yeah. The inside stinks and is covered in graffiti. This is not your typical fix and flip, the realtor said, as in buying a dilapidated property, renovating it, and selling it at a profit. This is mayhem. It's like walking into a crime scene. And her visceral reaction bleeds through in her blunt Redfin listing. Yeah. So, and also this carpet looks outdated too, with that strange looking kind of like rug imprint on the stairs. Yeah, and that's another thing with real estate. I would say every 10 to 15 years, even a new house just starts looking dated, and then you're going to have to spend more money trying to update the looks or repaint the place or get new flooring, get new countertops, or new fixtures to try to update the house in order to sell it. So there are just a lot of costs involved, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears involved. I've heard that it really only makes sense to invest in individual properties if you yourself are like a contractor and you know how to fix a lot of things on your own, or someone in your family or your spouse knows how to do that kind of work, because otherwise you're going to end up dealing with a lot of contractors. Some of them are shady too. And it can really eat away at your profits when you have to fix up a place, especially if a tenant trashes it like this place. I mean, the poor lady that had cancer, she's in remission, but she didn't even have the money to fix up the place or even slap on a coat of paint. She's not even located anywhere near Colorado. So the listing said, do not go on back deck. Do not open freezer in basement. So the lady definitely... The realtor got a lot of publicity for this house, because soon after all these articles were posted about the House of Horrors, there were other articles that said she was inundated with over 500 calls, texts, emails, and hundreds of offers. People were competing to buy this house. So can you believe it? In this neighborhood, people were saying the houses in that neighborhood typically would be worth, say, $700,000 to $800,000, and they were listing it at $590,000, which I thought was still kind of a lot, given what a mess and how disgusting the house is and the damage to parts of the house. But ultimately, the good news is that I did read a follow-up article that said that the house had already been sold, and the person that wanted to buy the house was someone that had grown up or previously lived somewhere around there. So the person had a personal connection to the neighborhood and really wanted to live there. So good luck to that person. I mean, I guess they also have a lot of cash sitting around so that they can totally tear up all the carpet and flooring and get out the nasty stains and smells. And, I don't know how many coats of paint or what's going to be needed in order to repaint all those walls with a spray paint on it so it doesn't show through. Yeah. Oh, yeah. People were rushing to offer. Yeah, exactly. Because I did notice around the time that I saw some of these articles, the listing disappeared. Like it didn't even look like it was for sale anymore. So maybe the realtor was so overwhelmed by all the emails and phone calls and stuff that she just took the listing down. Yeah, but then ultimately it did sell fairly quickly, though. Yeah. So I think it even sold for either asking price or a little over the asking price. Can you believe that? Wow. Oh, do you think agents are legally supposed to tell clients if the property is on a landslide or earthquake fault? Well, I don't know what Colorado law is, and I don't do real estate, but I don't think so because, normally the onus is on the seller. So that's why, as far as I know, the sellers have to produce a disclosure statement to indicate all sorts of things, with check boxes, like if there are issues like structural issues with the house, or of any whatever possible liens or litigation, there's like some sort of like official seller disclosure statement that the seller has to give. So it's not really up to the agent to disclose these things. Yeah, and again, that's also why if you do buy real estate, hopefully just for yourself, not as an investment, you always want to get your own home inspector. Don't just rely on their word. Because another thing is that I just feel like I have so many other stories to tell, but I see it's already been 50 minutes. But when I did ultimately buy a townhome years ago, I hired my own home inspector, paid him $500 to go through the whole place. And I mean, on one hand, I kept thinking, well, do I really need to do this? Do I really want to pay another $500 because it was new construction? And so let me just tell you guys now, because this is the truth. That townhome was built by MI Homes, and it was going to be new construction. And I got to pretty much choose almost everything that I wanted about the townhome, within their restrictions. I got to choose the flooring, like it had barely been built. They had just barely laid the foundation when I decided to buy this end unit 3-bedroom townhome. But I'm glad I didn't trust the builder. You just kind of assume that, oh, if it's new, then it's going to be perfect. But that is so untrue, because after I had the home inspected, turned out there was like green mold that was already growing on a lot of the wooden beams that they were using to build my house. So I was worried about a mold issue. There were just like other issues like no ventilation in the attic, which didn't pass code, but yet the town of Cary inspector didn't seem to notice that. So that was very bizarre. It's like, okay, there's no ventilation in the attic, so the place is going to be burning hot in there during the summer. So there were just like all these other issues that I was very surprised when I got the home inspector's report. And I had to keep dealing with this jerk that worked for the builder, who became increasingly hostile because I guess he thought I was being a pain in the butt for bringing up these issues and wanting to make sure that these things really were fixed right. Because even when I pointed out certain things were not done right, and this is what my home inspector said needed to be done, then they would claim it got fixed, but then it didn't. So I had to pay like a mold specialist to come back and make sure that, all the mold issues were indeed fixed. So I wasn't going to be like living in a house with all this mold growing behind the walls, once they put the sheetrock up and stuff, then you can't see it. So I was just really mad. It was just a bad experience overall. Ultimately, I didn't walk away from the house because, I really wanted it, and things did finally get fixed, but it was like pulling teeth to try to get this guy that represented the builder to finally get everything done right to specifications. So it was a real nightmare to deal with. Even though, of course, the sales lady was nice, the design center people were really nice. I was just like really surprised at how shoddy the construction could have been if I had not had the house inspected myself. Yeah. So when I bought my first house, I refused to sign on the day of closing. There were minor things to fix, but I figure if they hadn't fixed it in the 2 to 3 months prior to close, they wouldn't do it. Yep, that is so true. That's so true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is just really tough to deal with real estate. And another reason why I have no interest in investing in real estate, because I don't want these like potential nightmares. I've seen it myself in small claims court, other people's cases, as well as my clients' cases where they had to try to evict people and then the person just filed for bankruptcy. So then all the legal proceedings were stalled. tenants that damage the house very badly, or the tenant that goes out of control doing all sorts of weird renovations to the house that are unauthorized by the landlord, or it usually is more likely to happen if the landlord doesn't even live near where the rent property is and isn't there to check up on things. I mean, if you are a landlord, and I hope you're not, nobody out there is, but if you are a landlord, you better have the right to get into your property to inspect it whenever you feel like it, or at a reasonable time, every month or every couple of months or whatever, because who knows what the tenants are going to be doing inside your house. They can also have unauthorized people living in there. They could try to sublet the property, even though your contract says that there's not to be any subletting. There's so many things that can go wrong with renting to other people. Yeah. So anyway, those are pretty much the topics that I did want to cover here. Just some real estate horror stories to warn people. I did also want to mention that when I was young, my parents did buy some kind of like cheaper rental properties around Georgia too, which also seemed to cause a lot of headache, especially for my mom as she was trying to collect rent from deadbeat tenants, tenants complaining about roaches or problems. I remember her having to basically, drive after a tenant who claimed that she would meet with her someplace else and give her the rent payment. Another time my mom had to go to small claims court in Georgia, to try to evict somebody. Yeah. And, that's another thing, is that if you own real estate investment property, most of the time people have to rent properties because they don't have the good credit, or they don't have enough money saved up to buy their own home, or they might be transient people, who are just constantly being laid off or can't hold down the job and moving around from place to place. And that makes it incredibly difficult to ever collect your unpaid rent, even if you get a judgment against a person, if they've already skipped town or moved to another state. So what are you going to do? You can't, get blood out of a turnip, right? Or make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. So yeah, was this near Atlanta? Yes. Yeah. The stuff that happened to me. Yeah. Because my family lived around Atlanta when I was a kid, all the way until I finally sold my family's house in Dunwoody back in 2009. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Seb, for being here. So it's just about almost an hour here. So I want to thank you guys so much for being here today. And hopefully this message of bad real estate horror stories can, at least on a positive note, let people know that it is very difficult to make a good profit if you're looking at real estate investments. I think a lot of times that money could be better spent if you just sink the money into a nice, good old S&P 500 index mutual fund. Just invest the money, so you can easily liquidate it, or total stock market index fund, something that has low fees. That's probably in general going to be a lot easier on your life, not drive you crazy dealing with your real estate investments and worrying about selling and deadbeat tenants and stuff. So thank you for being here. Thanks, Christy. And hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend then. Have a good evening.